She curled up with her baby to die in the snow, but woke as a cowboy warmed them both. Maria had always been a strong and determined woman, but that winter had tested her in ways she could never have imagined. The snow had begun falling early that year, heavier than anyone remembered in the town. By the time December arrived, the world outside had been transformed into a silent white expanse, with thick layers of snow covering the streets, rooftops, and fields. The wind howled through the narrow alleys, rattling doors and windows, while the bitter cold seeped into every corner of the small, humble home where Maria lived. She could feel it through the thin walls and even under the meager layers of clothing she wore. Every breath seemed to carry ice, and the chills settled deep in her bones. Her husband, David, had died just a few months earlier, leaving her alone to face life's harsh realities. He had been a kind and gentle man, always ready with a smile or a word of encouragement. But illness had taken him, and with him went the sense of security and hope that Maria had relied on so heavily. Now, she was left with only her baby daughter, Lily, a fragile little girl with soft brown hair and curious eyes that sparkled even in the darkness. Lily was only 8 months old, and though her presence filled Maria with love, it also reminded her of the immense responsibility she now carried alone. At first, Maria tried to keep her spirits high for the sake of her daughter. She would hum little songs while feeding Lily, even when the milk ran low and the cupboards were nearly empty. She tried to smile and imagine better days ahead, clinging to memories of David's laughter and the times when the three of them had walked together in the sunshine. But as the weeks passed and the cold deepened, hope began to slip through her fingers. The town had little to offer. Neighbors were struggling themselves, and the local stores were running out of basic supplies. Food was scarce, and the small stove that had once warmed their home could no longer keep the house from freezing at night. Maria spent her days in quiet despair, rationing the last bits of food and keeping Lily close to her. The baby's tiny body needed warmth, and Maria would wrap her in blankets, holding her against her chest to share what little heat she could provide. But the nights were long, and the cold was relentless. Sleep brought no relief, only dreams of an endless winter that threatened to swallow them both. Sometimes Maria would lie awake, listening to the wind tearing at the roof, imagining the snow piling higher and higher, pressing against their fragile shelter. She could hear Lily's soft breathing and feel the gentle rise and fall of her small chest, and each movement reminded her of how precious life was and how fragile it had become. As the days grew shorter and the storm outside worsened, Maria found herself slipping further into hopelessness. She had tried to seek help, but the roads were blocked with snowdrifts, and the town's limited resources were stretched thin. No one could offer her a place to stay. No one could provide enough food to keep both her and Lily alive. The cold was not just outside. It was everywhere, in the walls, in the frozen ground, in the very air she breathed. Her hands were numb, her fingers stiff and pale, and even the blankets she wrapped around herself and her daughter seemed inadequate against the harshness of winter. One evening, as the storm reached its peak, Maria felt an overwhelming sense of despair. She looked at Lily sleeping in her arms, her tiny fingers curling around Maria's, and felt a pang of sorrow so deep it almost took her breath away. How could she protect this innocent life when she herself was barely holding on? The house, though once a place of comfort, now felt like a fragile shell against the storm. The snow pressed against the windows, and the wind's relentless howl made it impossible to imagine warmth or safety outside. Maria began to whisper to Lily softly, with tears slipping down her cheeks. "I'm so sorry, my darling," she said. "I can't keep you safe. I can't keep us alive. Maybe this will all be easier if we just sleep." Her words were not just whispers. They were a reflection of her deepest fear and sorrow. Maria had never imagined herself giving up, but the weight of exhaustion, grief, and cold was crushing. She wrapped Lily tightly against her chest, holding her close, feeling the little body shiver beneath the thin blanket. The baby stirred slightly but did not cry, as if sensing her mother's despair and responding with the quiet trust that only a child could give. Maria pressed her lips to Lily's forehead, feeling the warmth of her soft skin for what she feared might be the last time. The thought of leaving her daughter, even for a moment, filled her with both sorrow and a strange sense of resignation. As the night grew darker and the snowstorm intensified, Maria found a small corner of the room where the cold seemed just slightly less unbearable. She curled up on the floor, drawing Lily even closer into her embrace. The blankets were thin, the floor hard, and the wind's cold seemed to seep through every crack, but Maria clung to the hope that she could protect her daughter for just a little longer. She whispered little songs, old lullabies she had sung before, hoping that somehow her voice could shield them from the harshness outside. But inside, the fear gnawed at her relentlessly. Would they make it through the night? Would the storm consume them both before morning came? Hours passed, and Maria drifted in and out of consciousness. Her body ached, her fingers stiffened, and the world outside seemed to close in. Yet in the midst of this despair, her love for Lily never wavered. Every shiver, every whimper from her daughter pulled Maria back from the brink of hopelessness. She imagined David's face, imagined the warmth of their family together, and tried to hold onto that memory like a lifeline. But the cold was strong, and her strength was fading. She wrapped Lily closer, whispering promises of love, of protection, of a future she feared she might never see. In those long hours, Maria faced the raw power of nature and the fragility of human life. She felt the snow pressing against the world outside, the wind howling like a living thing, and the overwhelming silence of the winter night. And yet, even in this moment of deepest despair, there was a quiet resilience in her heart. She had not yet surrendered completely. She held Lily tightly, her arms aching, her body numb, but her heart determined to protect her child until the very last breath. By the time the first light of dawn crept through the frost-covered windows, Maria's body was weak, her skin pale, and her mind foggy from exhaustion. She had held on through the night, guided only by the instinct to keep her baby alive. Lily stirred slightly, opening her tiny eyes to the dim light, and Maria whispered words of love and reassurance. Though her body felt frozen and her hope was nearly gone, Maria had survived the night, clinging to the one reason she had to keep going, the life of her precious daughter. And so, in the deepest, coldest part of winter, a mother's love shone brighter than the harshest snowstorm, carrying her through a night that seemed endless, keeping her child safe in her arms against all odds. It was a night of fear, of despair, but also of unbroken courage and love that would carry them forward into whatever challenges the new day might bring. The storm did not let up as the night stretched on. Outside, snowflakes swirled in a chaotic dance, driven by the merciless wind. The town, normally quiet, was buried under layers of ice and white powder. Maria could hear the relentless beating of the snow against the roof and walls of her small home. Every gust of wind made her flinch. Every creak of the old wooden structure sent shivers down her spine. She had never felt so small, so fragile, and so alone in her life. The cold seemed to have a life of its own, creeping into the tiniest cracks, wrapping around her body, and pulling at her very breath. She hugged Lily closer, pressing the tiny body against her own as if her warmth alone could shield her child from the harsh winter outside. Lily stirred, her small hands grasping at Maria's shirt. Even though she was barely a year old, the baby's instincts were sharp. She sensed her mother's fear and responded with a quiet trust, nestling against her chest, relying entirely on Maria for protection. Maria felt tears welling in her eyes. How could she keep her child alive when she herself felt like she might not survive? Her heart ached with both love and despair. Maria thought about the days leading up to this storm, trying to remember a time when life had been easier. She remembered David's smile, his strong hands, the warmth of his voice telling her that everything would be all right. But now those memories felt like distant echoes from another world. Her husband was gone, the warmth of his love replaced by cold reality and loneliness. Maria had never imagined facing such a cruel winter alone. The weight of grief pressed on her chest, making it hard to breathe, and yet she refused to give up entirely. Lily's life depended on her, and for that reason alone she had to keep fighting. She thought about trying to leave to seek help, but the snow had piled so high that the streets were blocked, and any attempt to go outside seemed impossible. The town's few paths were slippery, dangerous, and nearly invisible under the thick blanket of white. Even if she had tried, she would have been risking both her life and Lily's. The choice was clear. She had to survive where she was. But as the hours passed, the cold seeped deeper, making every movement painful. Her body trembled uncontrollably, her teeth chattering despite the layers of blankets. Maria felt herself growing weaker, each breath more difficult than the last. To distract herself from the fear, Maria began talking softly to Lily, whispering little stories she had once heard from her mother. She spoke of sunny days, of green fields and flowers, of the sound of birds singing in the morning. Her voice, though weak, carried warmth that the bitter wind outside could not reach. She imagined Lily running through meadows, laughing in the sunshine, growing up healthy and happy. Even as her body grew numb, Maria's mind clung to hope in these small moments, creating a fragile shield against despair. Hours passed, and the snowstorm continued to rage. Maria felt the numbness spreading from her fingers to her arms and then to her legs. Her hands were stiff and pale, and she could barely feel Lily's tiny fingers holding on to her. Panic threatened to rise within her, but she pushed it aside. She reminded herself to stay calm, to hold her daughter, to survive. Every heartbeat felt like a countdown, every shiver like a warning, and yet she refused to let fear take control. She whispered reassurances to Lily, promises of protection, and even though her own heart was heavy with worry, she knew that her words carried a lifeline of comfort for her baby. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. The storm outside made the night feel eternal, and the silence inside her small home was almost unbearable. Maria thought of food, of warmth, of safety, things that had once been plentiful but were now impossible. She imagined neighbors and friends, people she had known all her life, and wondered if anyone would even know that she and Lily were struggling. Her mind painted pictures of herself and her daughter lost in the snow, a terrifying thought she tried desperately to push away. She had no choice but to remain in that corner, curled around her baby, clinging to life with every ounce of strength she had left. As the night wore on, Maria began to drift in and out of consciousness. Fatigue weighed her down like a heavy blanket, each moment of rest punctuated by nightmares of the cold swallowing them whole. Yet even in her near sleep, she held Lily close. The baby's tiny face pressed against her chest was a constant reminder of what she had to fight for. Maria murmured softly, rocking slightly even though her body ached and trembled. She tried to will warmth into their bodies, imagining a sunlit room where they could be safe, imagining a future where her daughter could grow up without fear. Even as despair threatened to take over, Maria felt a strange, persistent spark of hope. It was not a loud or powerful hope, but a small, fragile ember that refused to die. She imagined David's gentle words, his belief in her strength, and she whispered to Lily that they would survive. Each whisper was a battle against the storm, each gentle hug a fight for life. Maria realized that even in the darkest hour, a mother's love could be stronger than the cold, stronger than fear, stronger than exhaustion itself. The night was long, and Maria's body grew colder by the hour. She could feel frost forming on her eyelashes, her hair clinging to her damp skin. Every sound of the wind was a threat, every shadow in the room a reminder of danger. Yet through it all, she refused to let go. She pressed Lily closer, sharing every bit of warmth she could muster. She whispered stories of safety, of love, of days when they would play outside in the sunshine, and Lily responded in her own small ways, cooing softly, moving her tiny hands. That small response was enough to keep Maria going, enough to remind her that life was still there, still fragile, but still alive. By the early hours of morning, Maria was exhausted beyond measure. Her body was stiff and sore, her mind clouded by fatigue, and yet she had survived the night. Lily remained in her arms, alive, though weak and shivering. The snowstorm had not claimed them, and the first light of dawn began to filter through the frosty windows. Maria could see the soft, pale glow of morning, and for the first time in hours, a sense of relief washed over her. The night had been long and terrifying, but they had made it through. She held Lily close, tears slipping down her cheeks, feeling the tiny heartbeat against her own. Maria whispered softly, "We made it, my darling. We're still here." The warmth of her love, the determination to protect her daughter, had carried them through the darkest, coldest night of their lives. Though exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Lily's life depended on her, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Maria believed that they might just survive the winter. In those early hours of dawn, as the storm began to ease slightly, Maria realized the true strength that had carried her through. A mother's love, unwavering and fierce, could conquer even the harshest winter. She had faced the biting cold, the despair of loneliness, and the weight of hopelessness, yet she had not given up. She had survived for her child, and that survival was more powerful than any storm. As the light of morning touched the snow outside, Maria felt a fragile but growing hope. A new day was beginning, and with it came the promise of life, warmth, and perhaps help that would come when she least expected it. Even in the depths of despair, Maria had held on. The night had tested her strength, her courage, and her love, but she had emerged, exhausted but alive, with Lily safe in her arms. The storm outside was still fierce, but inside, a mother's determination shone brighter than the cold. She knew that whatever the day brought, she had proven to herself that love and hope could survive even the darkest, coldest night. The storm showed no sign of slowing as the first gray light of morning struggled to break through the heavy clouds. Outside, snow had piled higher than Maria had ever seen, creating a silent, frozen world where every tree branch sagged under the weight of ice, and every fence post disappeared beneath thick layers of white. The wind howled like a living thing, whipping across the empty streets and making the cold feel even more unbearable. Maria, still curled around Lily, could feel the chill seeping into her bones. Her body ached, her fingers were stiff, and her teeth chattered uncontrollably. But something deep inside her refused to give up. She held Lily close, whispering soft words of love and reassurance, her voice a lifeline against the fear that threatened to overwhelm them both. For hours, Maria had stayed motionless, conserving every ounce of energy she had left. Her mind wandered to memories of David, her husband, and the life they had shared before the storm. She remembered his laughter, the way he would cradle Lily in his arms, and the quiet strength he had given her. But those memories were bittersweet now, shadows of happier times that only reminded her of her current loneliness. Still, they gave her courage. She knew that if she could hold on for just a little longer, somehow help might come. Somehow she and Lily might survive. Far away, on the outskirts of town, a lone cowboy named James was returning home after tending to his ranch. He had been caught by the storm earlier than expected, and the snow had made travel difficult. The cold bit at his face, and his breath came out in thick white clouds, but he pressed on. He was used to harsh winters, but something made him uneasy this morning. Maybe it was the eerie silence of the town, blanketed entirely in snow, or maybe it was a feeling in his gut that something, or someone, needed help. As he rode slowly along the frozen road, his eyes scanned the whiteness ahead. Through the haze of falling snow, James saw a small movement. At first, he thought it might be an animal trapped in the storm, but as he drew closer, he realized it was a person. A woman, curled up on the frozen ground, holding a small child. Without a second thought, he spurred his horse forward, heart pounding. He had seen many dangerous situations in his life, but this one struck him with urgency. The woman's body was nearly hidden by the snow, her thin blankets offering little protection against the harsh winter. The baby in her arms seemed even more fragile, a tiny life hanging by a thread. James dismounted quickly, his boots sinking into the thick snow as he approached Maria. "Hey, are you all right?" he called, his voice strong but calm. Maria's eyes fluttered open, barely able to focus through the haze of exhaustion and cold. When she saw him, she felt a flicker of hope, though her body was too weak to respond. James knelt beside her, wrapping his coat tightly around both her and Lily. The warmth from his coat and his body pressed gently against them, and for the first time in hours, Maria felt something that resembled safety. He lifted them carefully, holding Lily against his chest and supporting Maria with his strong arms. The weight of their bodies was heavy, but he moved steadily, determined to get them to a safe place. Every step through the snow was difficult, but he did not rush. He knew that a sudden movement or a slip could be dangerous for both Maria and her baby. The storm was relentless, but James was focused, his mind entirely on the fragile lives he carried. Maria clung weakly to him, feeling warmth spreading through her frozen body. She could not speak, but the tears in her eyes spoke volumes. She had almost given up hope, and now, in the middle of the storm, a stranger had become their lifeline. As they walked toward the nearby cabin James kept for emergencies, he spoke softly, trying to reassure Maria. "You're going to be all right," he said. "We'll get you and the little one warm. Just hold on a little longer." Maria felt his words like a balm on her worried heart. The fear and despair that had gripped her for so long began to loosen, replaced by cautious hope. Lily stirred slightly against her mother's chest, sensing the warmth and safety that James provided. The tiny hands reached out, brushing against Maria's cheek, and Maria whispered softly, "We're going to be okay, my baby. We're going to be okay." The cabin was small but sturdy, built for times like these. James opened the door quickly, brushing snow from the threshold before helping Maria inside. He laid them carefully near the fireplace, and Maria could feel the heat washing over her cold, numb body. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt real warmth, both from the fire and from the compassion of a stranger who had come into their lives when they needed it most. She held Lily tightly, letting the warmth seep into her frozen limbs, and whispered soft words of thanks, even though her voice was weak. James moved quickly, stacking firewood and lighting a small stove, his movements practiced and efficient. He wrapped Maria and Lily in thick blankets, checking the baby's tiny hands and feet for frostbite. Maria watched, barely able to move, her body trembling from both cold and exhaustion. The cowboy spoke gently to the baby, telling her she was safe and loved, and Maria felt a deep sense of gratitude. In a world that had seemed cruel and indifferent, this man's kindness was a light in the darkness. She realized that sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places, and that human compassion can be a force stronger than any storm. Hours passed as James tended to them, offering warm water and gently rubbing Maria's hands and arms to restore circulation. Maria began to feel energy slowly returning to her frozen limbs, and Lily stirred more actively, cooing softly. The baby's life was fragile, but she was alive, and Maria's heart swelled with relief. She had almost lost hope, but James had brought them back from the edge. The storm outside continued to rage, but inside the cabin there was warmth, safety, and life. Maria felt tears streaming down her cheeks, not just from the cold, but from a deep, overwhelming sense of gratitude. James remained at their side, never leaving for long, ensuring that both mother and child were as comfortable as possible. He told stories to distract them from the storm outside, speaking softly about sunny days, gentle rivers, and open fields where they could play safely. Maria listened, holding Lily close, and felt her heart lighten slightly. The storm had been merciless, but this act of kindness had reminded her that not all hope was lost. She began to whisper to Lily as well, repeating James's words, telling the baby that the world could still be beautiful, even in the harshest conditions. As the hours passed, Maria felt her strength slowly returning. She realized that the night had nearly taken them both, but human kindness had given them a second chance. She looked at James, seeing not just a rescuer, but a person whose compassion had bridged the gap between despair and hope. The memory of the cold, lonely night was still fresh, but it was now paired with the warmth of rescue and the realization that life could continue, even after nearly giving up. By late morning, the storm had begun to lose some of its fury, though snow still fell in heavy flakes. Maria felt strong enough to sit up, holding Lily in her arms, and she looked around the small cabin, finally able to take a deep breath. She had survived the longest, coldest night of her life, not alone, but with the help of a kind stranger who had come when all seemed lost. The world outside was still harsh, but inside there was warmth, safety, and hope. Maria knew that this was the beginning of a new chapter, one where she could rebuild her life, one small step at a time. She looked down at Lily, her small face nestled against her chest, and whispered, "We made it. We're still here. We're going to be okay." For the first time in days, Maria truly believed it. The storm, the fear, the cold, they had not defeated them. Love, courage, and compassion had carried them through, and now, with a little warmth and care, they could start again. The thought of a new day, of survival, and of hope gave her strength she had thought she had lost forever. Inside the small cabin, the warmth of the fire wrapped around Maria and Lily like a protective blanket. For the first time since the storm began, Maria felt a sense of relief, but she knew that survival was far from guaranteed. Her body still ached from the long night spent frozen and exhausted, and Lily, though breathing steadily now, was still fragile and weak. James moved around the cabin quietly but efficiently, placing blankets carefully over them, fetching warm water, and tending to the small stove. Every movement he made was deliberate, born from experience and concern, and Maria could not help but feel a deep sense of gratitude for his calm, steadfast presence. She hugged Lily tighter, watching her tiny chest rise and fall with each breath. The baby's hands occasionally brushed against her mother's face, a simple, instinctive gesture that reminded Maria of the life she had almost lost. Even in the warmth of the cabin, she shivered, the cold still lingering in her bones. Her lips were cracked, her fingers stiff, and her muscles ached, but the knowledge that they were alive filled her with determination. She could not afford to dwell on despair any longer. Survival required every bit of strength she had left, and she drew courage from the presence of James and the fragile life in her arms. James noticed the stiffness in Maria's movements and spoke gently. "You're safe now. Just focus on getting warm and keeping Lily close. Don't try to move too much yet. Your body needs rest." Maria nodded weakly, grateful for his guidance. She felt comfort in his steady voice and the calmness he exuded. For hours, they stayed close to the fire. James periodically checked the stove, adjusted the blankets, and brought them warm sips of water. Lily began to stir more, her eyes opening wider as she sensed warmth and safety. Maria whispered softly to her daughter, telling her that they were safe now, that the storm had passed them by, and that they were going to be okay. Time moved slowly yet steadily as the hours passed. Maria's body began to regain some warmth, and the numbness in her fingers and toes slowly receded. She massaged her hands gently, feeling the circulation return. The relief was gradual, but it filled her with hope. She looked at Lily, marveling at the tiny life that had survived against such impossible odds. Tears filled her eyes as she realized how close they had come to losing everything. In that quiet cabin, surrounded by the remnants of a harsh storm, Maria felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for James, the cowboy who had appeared when they were at their most vulnerable. The storm outside began to lessen, though snow still fell lightly from the gray sky. Maria knew that the danger had not passed completely. The cold was still outside, and the roads were still blocked by snow. But for now, inside the cabin, there was warmth, safety, and the chance to heal. James moved quietly around the room, gathering extra blankets and stacking firewood so that they would not run out. He checked the baby again, carefully rubbing her tiny hands and feet to restore circulation and speaking softly to reassure her. Maria watched him work, feeling a deep sense of trust. In that moment, she realized that sometimes life gives second chances in the form of strangers who care. As the day progressed, Maria began to feel stronger. She shifted slightly, careful not to disturb Lily, and allowed herself to take in the small details of the cabin. It was simple but sturdy, with a small fireplace, a stack of firewood, and basic furniture. The walls were lined with photographs and old tools, reminders of the lives that had passed through the space. Maria realized that this cabin was more than just a shelter. It was a place of safety, a haven where they could recover from the storm and gather the strength needed to face the world again. James continued to tend to them, offering warm food, water, and blankets. He spoke in a calm, steady voice, telling stories of the ranch, of long days riding through fields and caring for animals. His stories were simple but comforting, filling the quiet room with life and distraction from the terrifying events of the night. Maria listened, holding Lily close, and allowed herself to relax slightly. The warmth of the fire, the gentle presence of James, and the knowledge that they were alive began to restore her spirit. She realized that survival was not just about enduring the storm. It was about having someone there to help carry the weight of fear and exhaustion. As the day wore on, Maria began to regain some strength. She was still weak, but she could sit upright and cradle Lily without trembling as much. She noticed the way her baby looked up at her with trusting eyes, and her heart swelled with love and determination. She whispered words of reassurance to Lily, promising that they would survive and thrive despite the storm. The thought of a future where they could be safe and warm gave her courage she thought she had lost. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, a determination to keep going for the sake of her daughter. James, sensing that Maria was beginning to recover, encouraged her gently. "You've been through a lot, Maria," he said, "but you're strong. You've held on, and now we just need to make sure you and Lily stay warm and fed. The worst is behind you, I promise." Maria nodded, feeling a small spark of hope ignite in her chest. The night had been terrifying, the storm relentless, but they had survived. And now, with warmth, care, and a safe place to rest, they had a chance to rebuild. The afternoon passed slowly, and Maria began to feel more like herself. She held Lily in her arms, singing softly to her, telling her stories of sunny days and open fields. Each word, each gentle touch, reminded her of the life they had fought to preserve. Lily responded with soft coos and tiny movements, a sign that the warmth and care were reaching her tiny body. Maria felt a deep sense of relief. They had survived the night, and now, in the calm after the storm, she could begin to heal, both physically and emotionally. As evening approached, the fire crackled warmly in the fireplace, casting a golden glow over the cabin. Maria and Lily were wrapped in blankets, their bodies finally relaxed after hours of tension and fear. James prepared a small meal, careful to ensure it was warm and nourishing. The aroma of food filled the room, a comforting reminder of life continuing despite the hardships. Maria ate slowly, savoring each bite, and felt energy returning. The baby lay quietly in her arms, beginning to drift into a peaceful sleep. In that quiet moment, Maria reflected on the events of the past day. She thought about the storm, the fear, the cold, and the desperation that had almost consumed them. But she also thought about James, the cowboy who had appeared at the right moment, offering warmth, care, and hope. She realized that life could be unpredictable and harsh, but it could also be full of unexpected kindness. She vowed to hold on to that thought, to carry it with her as they faced the challenges ahead. By nightfall, Maria and Lily were both resting comfortably, the warmth of the cabin and the fire creating a sense of safety that had been missing for so long. James remained nearby, keeping watch and making sure the fire stayed strong. Maria closed her eyes, holding Lily close, and felt a sense of peace she had not experienced in days. The storm outside had been merciless, but inside, love, compassion, and determination had triumphed. She knew that there would be more challenges ahead, but for now they had survived. In that small cabin, surrounded by warmth and care, Maria realized the true meaning of resilience. She had faced the harshest night of her life, holding on to hope even when everything seemed lost. And now, with help, she could begin to recover. Lily's soft breathing against her chest was a reminder of what she had fought for and what she must continue to protect. The night had tested their strength, but they had emerged stronger, ready to face the future together. The following morning dawned crisp and clear, a gentle contrast to the fury of the storm that had battered the town just days before. Sunlight reflected off the snow, sparkling like tiny diamonds across the frozen landscape. For Maria, the sight was almost unbelievable. After the terror, the despair, and the endless night of freezing cold, the world seemed to have transformed overnight. She looked down at Lily, who stirred in her arms, her tiny eyes blinking in the bright light. The baby was warm now, her soft skin flushed with health, and her tiny fingers curling around Maria's hands. Maria felt a wave of relief and gratitude she could barely put into words. They had survived against the odds, and for the first time in what felt like forever, hope filled her heart. James was already busy in the cabin, stacking the last of the firewood and preparing for the day ahead. He glanced at Maria and Lily, his calm presence a comforting anchor. "How are we feeling this morning?" he asked gently. Maria smiled weakly but sincerely. Her body was still tired, and the events of the past 2 days had left their mark, but she felt stronger than she had in days. Lily cooed softly in response, reaching for her mother's face. Maria held her close, taking a deep breath and allowing herself to feel the warmth and safety that had been missing for so long. The cabin, though small and simple, had become a sanctuary. Its walls, lined with reminders of life before the storm, now seemed welcoming and full of promise. Maria realized that the warmth inside was more than just from the fire. It was from the kindness and care of James, the stranger who had arrived when they were at their lowest. She thought about the night spent shivering in the cold, the fear that had almost consumed her, and the fragile hope that had kept her going. And she knew that they had survived not just because of luck, but because someone had cared enough to act. With James' help, Maria began to plan the next steps. Food and supplies were scarce in the town, and travel was still difficult because of the snow, but there were small ways to rebuild. James encouraged her to rest while he went to check the town for any available resources. Maria watched him leave briefly, feeling a mixture of gratitude and relief. She held Lily tightly, feeling her warmth and listening to her soft breathing. Each tiny movement, each coo, reminded her of what they had fought for. Survival was not just about making it through the storm, it was about giving life a chance to continue. As the day progressed, neighbors and townspeople began to emerge from their homes. The storm had left much of the town isolated, but word spread quickly about Maria and Lily's survival. People came with food, blankets, and clothing, offering help without hesitation. Maria was overwhelmed by the generosity and concern of others. For days, she had felt invisible, alone, and helpless, but now she realized that the world still had kindness and community. Tears filled her eyes as she accepted warm meals and soft blankets, feeling gratitude for both the strangers who had helped and the friends who had supported her from afar. James returned shortly after, carrying bundles of supplies he had managed to gather. He smiled as he saw Maria and Lily surrounded by warmth, food, and the care of others. "You're not alone anymore," he said simply. Maria nodded, feeling a deep sense of relief. The storm had been merciless, but human kindness had proven stronger. She realized that survival was a shared effort, that the warmth of others could lift them out of despair and into hope. Lily squirmed happily in her mother's arms, reaching for the blankets and food that surrounded them, and Maria smiled for the first time in what felt like an eternity. In the days that followed, Maria and Lily slowly regained strength. Each morning brought small victories: a warm meal, a sunny day, a new piece of clothing. Maria cherished each moment, grateful for every sign that life could continue and even flourish. She began to help James with small tasks around the cabin, grateful to contribute and to feel useful once more. The rhythm of daily life, simple as it was, provided a sense of normalcy and security that Maria had feared was lost forever. She held Lily close, watching her grow stronger and more curious with each passing day, and felt a renewed determination to face whatever challenges the future might bring. Word of their survival spread throughout the town, and people came to see Maria and Lily, offering encouragement and support. Each visitor brought a reminder that life could continue even after the darkest night. Maria realized that their story of fear, despair, and ultimately rescue was a lesson in resilience and human compassion. She spoke quietly with those who visited, sharing her gratitude and telling them how a single act of kindness had made all the difference. Through these conversations, she felt a connection to her community that she had never fully realized before. The winter, though still harsh, began to feel less threatening. Maria and Lily were safe inside the cabin, protected from the cold, and surrounded by people who cared. James remained a constant presence, not just as a rescuer but as a friend and guide. He helped Maria understand that the world could be both cruel and kind, and that hope often comes when it is least expected. Maria listened, learned, and allowed herself to feel the warmth of human connection for the first time in weeks. She realized that her life was no longer defined solely by struggle. It was also defined by the love and care she had received. One morning, as sunlight poured through the windows, Maria held Lily close and whispered, "We made it, my darling. We're going to be okay." The baby cooed softly, her tiny fingers brushing against her mother's face. Maria smiled, feeling a profound sense of peace. The storm that had threatened to end their lives was behind them, replaced by warmth, hope, and the knowledge that they could face whatever came next together. Every day brought small challenges, but also opportunities to grow, to heal, and to build a life filled with love. In time, Maria began to rebuild her life with a renewed sense of purpose. She found small ways to support herself and her daughter, using the skills she had and the assistance of neighbors and friends. James continued to visit, offering guidance, sharing stories, and helping whenever needed. The bond that had formed during the storm became a lasting connection, a reminder of the power of human kindness and the strength of compassion. Maria realized that even in the darkest moments, there is light to be found, and that courage and love can carry people through the most difficult challenges. As the winter slowly gave way to spring, the snow melted, revealing the world once hidden beneath its white blanket. Maria and Lily were stronger, healthier, and more resilient than ever. The experience of surviving the storm together had created an unbreakable bond between mother and daughter, and a deep appreciation for the kindness of strangers. Maria reflected on how close they had come to losing everything, and yet, through courage, love, and compassion, they had found a new beginning. The town, too, had been changed by the story. People spoke of Maria and Lily's survival as a testament to human resilience, a reminder that hope can shine even in the darkest moments. Maria often shared her experience quietly, speaking of the fear, the cold, and the overwhelming despair, but also of the extraordinary kindness of James and the support of the community. She wanted others to know that even in hardship there is strength, and even in loneliness there is hope. For Maria, life became a series of small victories, each one a reminder that survival was not just about enduring hardship, but about embracing life, love, and human connection. She watched Lily grow, discovering the world with wonder and joy, and felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The fear of that long night in the snow remained in her memory, but it no longer controlled her. Instead, it reminded her of the strength she possessed, the resilience of the human spirit, and the power of compassion. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky with warm colors, Maria held Lily in her arms and looked out over the snow-covered landscape, now softened by the gentle light. She thought of the storm, of the night they had almost lost, and of the cowboy who had rescued them. Gratitude filled her heart, a quiet, steady warmth that replaced the fear and despair she had once felt. She knew that life would bring challenges, but she also knew that love, courage, and hope could overcome even the darkest of times. In the end, Maria understood that survival was not just a physical act. It was an emotional and spiritual journey. Through fear, despair, and the merciless cold, she had discovered the true strength of a mother's love, the transformative power of kindness, and the resilience of the human spirit. Together, Maria and Lily had faced the storm and emerged stronger, ready to embrace a future filled with hope, warmth, and the unwavering bond that had carried them through the darkest night.